Good evening, everyone. I appreciate everyone being here. We have a good turnout tonight, and I'd like to say a few things before we get started with the presentation. First of all, welcome to the fall series of the Pittsburgh SMPTE Section. More and more of these virtual meetings are going out on a national basis, so we may have some people who are outside the Western Pennsylvania area. Unfortunately, we're still virtual. We were hoping that we could have some live and in-person meetings. Maybe we still can, but things are kind of going slow toward that direction at this point. We had a SMPTE Section chair meeting, national meeting yesterday, and the two main topics were membership, and which really means getting meeting topics that are of interest to the members, and presentation topics, which are obviously tied to membership as well. And we're looking for a couple of advisors to the section as to meeting topics of interest. So if you would like to help out, would be glad to include you in the managers meeting as we discuss future meeting topics. SMPTE provides a lot of benefits, not the least of which is SMPTE Plus, which is a whole long series of webinars that is very interesting and deals with the latest topics. The SMPTE Journal, the SMPTE Annual Technical Conference, standards updates. There's a lot to get from SMPTE. And if you're a student, it's $15 a year. Can hardly beat that. I'd like to take a second to thank the section managers, Bill Bennett, who is presenting tonight and who is also our Zoom master, George Hoover, who is a SMPTE fellow, Greg Abel works for Sony. Greg is out on the beach there. Mike Janatis from TechSolve, who's home, John Luff, another SMPTE fellow. He's out in Utah or Arizona or somewhere. I'm kidding, but it's a nice picture behind him. Ed Fraticelli from Production Masters, who his camera isn't working right now, but Ed, good to have you here. And Dan Turk from NEP. Dan will be making the presentation next month in October. So Dan, tell us about that presentation.
Yeah, so basically as a mobile production vendor, for many of the networks, we have had many new challenges on how can we do what we've been doing in new ways? How can we now, so that started with COVID and we couldn't travel and couldn't have any on site. So now how do we take advantage of that and do production kind of post-COVID in new ways, using and embracing the technology of today, connectivity, challenging some of the norms? Does everything have to be on site? Can it be more centralized and used more? Therefore everyone can share in the cost savings and get more production and, maybe use A-level people on more shows because you don't have to travel, 1 day of air, 2 days of travel. So that's what we'll be talking about.
Oh, thank you, Dan. Dan's presentation will be late in October. We don't have a date yet, but it will be very interesting to both early career people who are thinking about getting into the mobile business. It has major repercussions all up and down the line to everyone involved in sports and live events. We've had some great presentations in the past, and this will be another one. Our presentations are now featured on the national SMPTE website. Bill's presentation is one of those. So we're getting some recognition. We've had some very good presentations in the past. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill Bennett now for his presentation on captioning. Thank you for being here.
Hey, John. Thank you, my friend and neighbor. It's a pleasure. And actually, it's an honor to be presenting both in the SMPTE forum and also to my neighbors. So it's really comfortable. Thank you for inviting me. So I think from a Zoom standpoint, I might recommend you guys turn off your cameras, and I'm going to do the same. And then I'm going to start presenting. And also don't forget, mute your microphones. And stand by, folks. All right, there we go. Cool. Yeah, my name is Bill Bennett, and I'm with Enco Systems, a company based out of Michigan that's been around for a few decades. You may have heard of our products in radio or in television. We've got systems and thousands of customers around the world over the years using our automation and playout systems and automated AI-based captioning systems and video playout systems and shot boxes for audio and stuff like that, and more fun things to come actually down that pipeline. So, but tonight we're going to talk about captioning, and I really, in the spirit of SMPTE, I want to keep this brand agnostic. So I won't really be talking about our product or our company very much. It's just a little bit of background maybe, but then we'll get into the world of captioning and kind of explain what that's all about. We will have a brief overview of the technology. And then we're gonna, and also, by the way, I should say the history of the technology, which is fascinating. And then we'll kind of get to the current state of the art. And try to kind of give you an understanding of what's possible with captioning, because as you'll see, it's more than just text on a screen for those who are hard of hearing or deaf, although that's certainly the prime reason why it was first invented. And so, yeah, Enco, there we go. So we mentioned this already, and I'll just kind of skip past that. But our roots are in factory automation, which when that was coupled with broadcast technology has made for some very robust and scalable architectures over time. So what are captions? The captions are part of a greater accessibility ecosystem. We know about wheelchair ramps. We've seen Braille on the ATM machines. We certainly have seen closed captions ourselves or open captions. We're familiar with sign language, specifically ASL, American Sign Language, large print. As we get bigger, our phone screens might be getting bigger. But captioning is one of the early electronic forms of accessibility improvements, and so that's kind of what that is. But again, lots more benefits come down the pike from it over time. Some of you are no doubt captioning now if you're broadcasters, especially for television over the air. So you are familiar with the regulatory reasons to caption. You have to do it. As we'll discuss later, any content that's ever been on the air or will be on the air or is over the air, I should say, also has to be captioned. But there's a growing trend in lawsuits brought under the guise of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so that's causing a lot of content to get captioned out there before any kind of regulations impact that space. What's also neat is that with captioning, you can make your video searchable by adding metadata to the video. Another cool thing is transcripts. Whenever something's captioning, you're also getting transcripts generated from it. And so that's a benefit that is very useful later down the pike. And also think of loud places. How can you always get to enjoy what's on TV unless you can maybe sometimes see what's being captioned? And we'll kind of talk about that. A statistic in the US, the National Association for the Deaf, NAD, estimates that approximately 48 million, nearly 1 out of 5 Americans are deaf or hard of hearing. And so that's a lot of people. And trying to, on a humorous side of things, another 13 million there might be watching Downton Abbey and needing to turn those captions on to hear what those accents are. Either that or crank the TV way up. So that's definitely what happens in my household. The history of captioning this is what's fascinating. And so it's been done over 100 years now. And actually it wasn't really called captioning then, it was really just transcriptions. And we've all heard of stenographer machines, right? And that's how captioning is still generally done today, as you'll see. It's not an ordinary keyboard. Really interesting. It was done originally on paper to have a legal court record of the proceedings of a session in court or any kind of other live event where you have people in a room and need a legal record of it. Of course, that wasn't really a broadcast thought back then. And over time, the machines have really evolved. These machines here didn't originally, the whole concept behind typing on a stenography machine is the phonetics of the sounds of the words, not exactly the spelling necessarily. And if you notice, there's not enough keys there to really even map out a QWERTY keyboard. The funny thing there is this keyboard, this technology supports multi-touch and a mechanical system long ago. So even before our smartphones and screens had multi-touch, we've had that in a mechanical system. It was invented in 1906 by a Texas court teenager named Ward Stone Ireland, and he was studying shorthand to record sessions by shorthand in the courtroom, which is what they used to do, but also a Texas court reporter and inventor, and look what he came up with. Pretty cool. I have no idea how to type in one of those things. Here's an example of it. Now, a modern one, right? USB ports, SD cards, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, stuff like that. Neat little example here. This a little screenshot from the world of freelancers. The top section is the line is the name Dan, right? And then the bottom line is did Ann. I'm not sure grammatically where that goes, but I mean, that sure doesn't look like those words, but it's very interesting. It's a real black art to figure out how to do that. Now going into television, PBS, and you know, a lot of times we can thank public broadcasting doing some pretty innovative things that are out there ahead of some other broadcast outlets and stuff. Back in 1972, they made the first open caption broadcast. Now I just said open caption a couple times now. I said that. What's the difference? Open captions are captions burned in on the screen, typically the lower third, and they're permanently there. Can't take them off. They're part of the video signal. Whereas closed captions is data integrated within a video signal or coming in, you know, in coincidence with it to your device. And you can turn those on and off. That's embedded closed captions. So that's kind of the difference there. But when they did this originally, they were actually in an edit suite on tape, of course, playing back a little bit of it, got a sentence maybe out of that, stop the tape, throw that into a chyron, rewind the tape, put up the graphic, and there's the open caption. And they did that mostly sentence at a time, very time consuming. But that's a start. That's where it began. Now then we go into closed captions, more technology here. A very progressive university for the School of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. They did a test with WETA, a public broadcaster in the Washington, D.C. area. And they did this embedding with what we'll get to in a minute, the old line 21, vertical blinking. And they had data in an analog signal. And so that is something a television or set-top box over time, once mandated by the US government, can, you know, and other governments around the world, can read and display this data. So analog and basic, but it got the job done. Nothing fancy with the fonts. You know, but just getting it out there was really the process at that time. Now, as we've evolved through ATSC now and the Grand Alliance and what digital television brings us, of course, there's a lot more opportunities now to send customizable fonts and color combinations, different sizes, stuff like that. So you as a content creator, if you're creating content, you can really customize the fonts that your viewer is seeing on screen. Mind you, that person at home or on their smartphone or wherever they're viewing the content can also change those settings. And so they can make this, the font, they can vary that to a different font character type that they wish, or a different size or color. It's customizable to such a degree, they can make them really big if they want. So as a content creator, one might not like that because your content's basically obscured by text, but just be aware, you never know what the end user might do. So it's pretty powerful. Software is very, very helpful to customizing these things nowadays. Back though, before software, we had that analog line 21 I mentioned. Those captions were called EIA 608 or CEA 608. And interesting, you'll notice the throughput, 480 bits per line field. That's 32 characters of caption text per line, per frame also. So per each 30 frames, excuse me. So very limited bandwidth. Then again, it's just ASCII text. That's really all you needed at that time. So, and of course, you all are probably familiar, unless there's any kind of audio only folks on this webinar. If you have a TV, an analog TV that's kind of out of sync or out of frame, you'll see at the top, you'll see 1 or 2 lines of data going by, and that's the vertical blinking. So if we can even find a TV to do that with. So now here comes ATSC, right? Within the standard today for digital television, it's EIA 708 or CEA 708. And it's much more robust. And again, you can do the rendering at the over-the-top receiver. Interesting point, the HDMI cable specification does not pass through the caption data. So you actually have to turn on captions, therefore, at your set-top box, not at the television, unless the TV itself is doing the decoding, the rendering. So that's a little interesting little thing there. And the FCC does have a requirement that TVs over 13 inches and larger have to support caption data. So pretty neat kind of technical back end at this point. Now, so that's the display side of things, right? Let's talk for a bit about the real interesting things where humans and automated intelligence, or automated captioning in general, ASR, automatic captioning, generally AI based. We'll kind of compare those two. We'll talk a little bit about live and real-time captions, and then also the differences between cloud and on-premises. Because there's kind of like a lot of, like I said here, mentioned mix and match. The humans clearly are the best captioners on the planet, and they always will be, because they have this thing called a brain, and it can really understand what people are saying, especially when people are talking on top of each other. So, you know, of course, in a courtroom or on a live television program, especially if there's a round table or something, you're going to get people interrupting each other. The humans can create what are called macros and pre-save words and names and unique spellings. We'll also see the technology, the automated side can do that as well. One also nice thing about a computer is that as we'll talk about, it's really good at captioning every word it hears. It can't funnel though down one dialogue versus another. That's good and bad, because a human could do that. A human could hear two people talking back and forth, and for some reason, maybe intentionally or accidentally, have a bias towards one person's dialogue. And when they're interrupting each other, they may still only be captioning one person in that dialogue. So, you know, it's kind of two ways of looking at that coin. But you know, humans kind of have that kind of perspective sometimes of listening to one thing at a time. But you know, the humans are great because they've been doing this for a long time. The problem is, speaking of long time, captioning live is a laborious process, because you constantly are trying to keep up and you don't want to get behind. And so they can only do so much captioning without taking a break. And also, there's not a lot of humans that know how to do this these days. Like I said, it's a black art. It's really hard to learn. So it's troubles. There are a lot of content creators are having troubles getting staff to build out their pool of stenographer operators. So, and of course, because they're humans, you need to schedule these folks to show up and be available and not be interrupted. And hopefully their cat or their dog doesn't jump on their keyboard. I should say most people who caption do caption from their homes these days, and that's a fairly long-term trend. Not too often do you get captioners on site, although for some live events or secure environments like DoD and stuff, you might get on-site captioners. Oh, and one more thing about humans, sometimes when they can't keep up, they're going to do a summary of the sentence that's being said, just to get past that and do the next sentence. You'll find with the ASR environment, it does not do that. The AI-based systems are unable to summarize. And frankly, from what we hear from the deaf and hard of hearing community, sorry, they don't want it summarized. They actually want the words specifically as they were spoken. So. Again, kind of, you know, backs and forths here. The ASR certainly is lower cost. The more you use it, like any computer, the less expensive it becomes. Also, it can't do a typo. Certainly in a human on a keyboard, you can do a typo by accident. With an ASR environment, whatever's in the database goes out. And if it's not in that database of, you know, that vocabulary, it won't go out. Benefits also include the ability to learn new words and also to pull in words from finite libraries, much like a human can do, the ASR can do as well. One of the most modern trends, something that I should say my company is familiar with, is statistical analysis. So when an ASR is running, it's not just doing raw speech to text, it's also doing analysis on the word order, so that when it sees certain words, ambiguous words like the word there or to, you know, there's multiple spellings for both of those. How does it know which is the correct spelling? It does it because it waits for 1 or 2 seconds to see what the next few words after that are, to see grammatically what the right word is that might fit in that. And then when it comes up with words that it doesn't think belong, that it's in its own vocabulary, then it looks to these external libraries to see, oh, well, that's the word that actually belonged in there. So that's pretty cool watching it work. You can see it thinking. But with a computer, like I mentioned, background noise or people talking back and forth on top of each other, it may have trouble determining whose voice to use, or may not be able to hear the voice at all. We do bandwidth limiting, of course, on the audio coming in, so we can kind of get out some of the outlying frequencies, but it's not entirely perfect with something on top of the vocal range, like a jackhammer type of thing, interview on the street, doing a live interview, and there's a jackhammer in the background. Might be interesting to see how that works. Depends how loud it is. But this emerging science is fascinating, continuously evolving, and we all know that deep neural network engineering is just taking off. So it just keeps better and better. It is in fact science, and neat to see it evolve. The ASR, like a human, can do real-time or file-based. And an ASR like human can be cloud or on premises. Now, when I say cloud for a human, of course, they're in that case, they're probably doing it at home. But when it's just data, these companies, massive companies that take human captioners and route their inbound and outbound feeds, content in and caption data out, that is kind of a cloud-based operation when you think about it. With ASRs, they're around 95 to 98% accuracy with clean audio, by the way. So that's getting really good. The FCC does require, as we see, as we'll see in a second, such things. Real-time versus offline. This is kind of interesting. Of course, we mentioned that original PBS broadcast. That's the ultimate offline captioning. But nowadays, real-time takes about 3 to 6 seconds. We say with our stuff, about 3 to 4 seconds. And that's most of that's really that speech to text or the statistical analysis going on. Neat thing about live is, what we love about live is it's also live. You can't go back, right? Whereas if in post, if you've got a recording of something you want to caption it, you can fix that later before you maybe publish a final video. So the others, and forgive me if I go back and forth here, but that's my style. Offline, really about 2 times real time. So at least with our technology, about an hour-long video, you can caption about 25-30 minutes if it's offline. So you can do a lot of batch captioning pretty fast. Either of these can be used, live or real time. Either of them can be cloud or on a premises. Okay, I did say I wasn't going to talk about ENCO's products too much, but if you do a lot of secure kind of stuff, or DoD, right, there's a growing need for the military to have secure captioning services for their accessibility initiatives. They don't want to use a human or cloud-based scenario at all. They want to have either, their ideal is a non-human in the building, which is fully on premises. And by definition, the dialogues they have don't leave those secure environments. And so that's the ultimate, I think, is giving that kind of reliability also, because if you're on-prem, you're not using kind of internet connection, any kind of cloud service, anything like that. You're completely reliable on-prem. So yeah, and live and real-time both can benefit from pre-added word lists and libraries and stuff like that. So they generally use the exact same engine, just one happens a lot faster. Now, cloud versus on-prem, I've been kind of talking about how humans do this captioning at home. I mean, back originally, they would take, if they're in market, they can get something over the air. Watching off a satellite's not recommended. You add more of a delay there. They could be watching off a stream, something like that. A lot of times they caption video content by just hearing it. So that's interesting. And then they may have a, hearing it over, 3.4 kilohertz voice grade telecom line, or ISDN for, that's ISDN, especially if you get data back to the uplink or internet more often these days. Of course, internet can go down with these connections. And if you're using humans at their homes, hopefully, again, they're there and not something has come up. But the content leaves the building typically in broadcast, that's not a big problem. So on premises, definitely simpler architecture, like I've alluded to, no connections outside the building to lose. Typically your device is in a rack with 19-inch rack bolted in there, so it'll be there. Most systems caption one session, either offline or file-based, at a time per box. So depending on what vendor you get, you'll probably pretty much get the same thing. One piece of hardware that will do one session at a time. We actually can do live and offline at the same time, but only one of each at the same time. So, and that's pretty standard configuration. This is kind of an interesting little workflow, but this is really the complexity you get. Now, we're talking still now about television broadcast. I haven't talked about radio or captioning for all kinds of other applications, but the vast majority of captioning that's being done there is historically has been for television. And that's where it goes over the air and somebody is at home, somehow they're getting that signal, whether it's just audio or watching the video, and then they're captioning it. And then it's going back over some sort of data connection back to the station and to uplink. So a bit arcane and complicated, but that's always what works. So the nice thing about on-premises, pretty darn elegant. Audio in, caption data out. And in some pieces of hardware out there, one I'm particularly familiar with, can even embed the data within a SDI signal, HD SDI signal looping right through it. So it's HESDIN with audio and video, passing back out with just the additional ancillary data, the caption data, and off to uplink it goes. So can't make it much simpler than that. So why caption? Right, so we talked about regulatory and ADA lawsuits. The FCC regulations are there. these lawsuits have been growing, and I have some examples of those coming up. We talked about text and search content. If you've looked through YouTube videos these days, or if you've gone to Google itself and search for things, you'll find YouTube videos coming up that has certain index points within them where those were actual words were. That's because they have caption data to search through. Pretty cool. Also, customer experiences are improved across platforms. Again, you don't have to be deaf or hard of hearing to appreciate captions. What's also neat is where the state of the art is going in live dynamic translations between languages. Once you caption, you've got data, whether it's a human or an ASR, you've got data, and you can do powerful things with that. And then, of course, we talked about transcripts. So we're going to drill down a little bit there now. There's a neat example I've got coming up here of a radio station that's been captioning lately, and we're really proud to be working with them. I think that is definitely the next area to watch grow from an accessibility standpoint. But even if you're just a broadcaster or a content creator that's doing video work, I think personally, it's a term I've come up with, is captioning really is the third rail of content. You've got audio and you've got video. Captioning, it's an essence. It's certainly an essence of the audio and spoken word, but it's still a content rail, right? And so that's something new to think about. It's not just don't do it because you have to, do it because you can do stuff with it. Venue owners need to be really concerned about this over time, because different municipalities and governments around the country, local governments, have been passing laws requiring captioning on monitors or displays of certain sizes. And we'll kind of drill back to that. Even mobile developers, even a small screen gets captions. Systems integrators, that's a big thing, because there's a lot of legacy stuff out there that is, I'll digress for just a second here. Here we go. Some folks are installing caption systems or technology into legacy infrastructure that isn't designed to accept or pass through caption data. A lot of this happens with municipalities that start doing webcasting, and they may have some hardware encoder that they've been doing, some webcasting with already. They decide to add captions. That device may not have the firmware now or ever to support captioning data. So if you're a systems integrator, you've got to really make sure all the devices along the line can accept, acknowledge, and pass through caption data. So there's actually two. There's the ADA. There's two kind of regulatory environments that aren't directly related to captions but accessibility yet. We mentioned the ADA, but also the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 that prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in programs conducted by federal agencies. So there's a growing awareness. Now that's 1973, but there's a lot of more recent things going on too with the government. So, because everyone's getting older, and everyone, when you get older, typically has some hearing loss, if not profound, certainly some limited hearing loss. For you over-the-air broadcasters, you certainly know these words. You probably think of these at 3 a.m. and hope you're still in compliance. But for the FCC, there's a somewhat summarized. I won't read the whole thing, but they have to be obviously accurate, synchronous with the content, complete, and properly placed so as to not interfere with other graphics that may be on the screen. There is a large national television shopping network that's using us, and they television graphics for those folks are very unique and in very specific places. And so in that case, you've got to make sure the captions are in such a place that it doesn't interfere with the content. They wouldn't want it to interfere, of course, with the graphics anyway, but you got to make sure it doesn't. For now, still, the FCC does not regulate home videos, DVDs, or over-the-top streaming. So once in a while, you get the feeling they might, so something to keep aware of. But the National Association for the Deaf has definitely had some significant influence on, again, non-FCC regulated content being captioned, and talking to a lot of local governments around the country. Some examples: the ADA. The NAD wants a lot more than the FCC, right? They want all pre-recorded and live programming 24/7 to be captioned, which is great. When we think about the next line, emergency broadcasts, national weather situations, tornadoes, you don't have the time probably, or very little time to get a human captioner. But if you have an ASR environment, you've all of a sudden flip the switch, boom, you're captioning. And also in public displays, that's what we're seeing in a lot of local governments for venues. Couple of examples of surprising examples, I think, of institutions that got in trouble for not captioning. Again, this is not the FCC, right? These organizations, Harvard and MIT in this example, were sued for content that lacked, like content like online lectures and courses that were on the web, but were not captioned. And so they were violating the Americans with Disabilities Act by doing that, by not having it captioned. They fixed it. Another progressive organization, I would say, is NPR. They also got in trouble for not having their content, or enough of their content, all of their content, where possible, captioned. So they now Netflix and Amazon as well. Good luck trying to find a video these days that isn't captioned, because they got in trouble. So, and that was a while ago. That was 2014 for Netflix. And these are examples. Specifically, like towns large and small. Ann Arbor, Michigan, small little college town. So televisions that are in a public place that have content on them that has caption data have to be displaying the captions. The same with Seattle. Also, I think I read in San Francisco as well. And that involves all kinds of public gathering places, stadiums, and all kinds of venues, waiting rooms, things like that. So that's just going to continue to grow. And like I mentioned, Google, YouTube, of course, owned by Google. When you enter stuff into their Google search engine, you will find YouTube videos that are indexed to where those words are spoken. What's interesting is, as a caption creator, I'm sorry, as a content creator, something you really need to keep in mind, and also if you're a content distributor of any type, keep your downstream customers aware of this. I guess it would be upstream customers. Keep your content creators aware of this. If they don't have captions in their content, think of this. If you're deaf or hard of hearing, especially if you're deaf, if you go to a search engine or especially like YouTube, and you enter some data to to search across their video collection, there's a checkbox that you can turn off or on that will prohibit non-captioned content from showing up, because basically you can't hear it. So if you can't see the captions, why do you even want to know it's there? Right? Depending on what you're looking for, of course. So content that isn't captioned may not even be searching or showing up in search engines for some folks. So, by design. So keep that in mind. Adding captions makes your content more available to people. And of course, we're seeing a lot more companies using data mining systems for their own content in-house to find video that has caption metadata associated with it to go deep. I'll go aside. Another example real quick is, imagine you're a broadcaster and you've got an hour-long radio interview. And at that point, that guest said a couple of times a certain keyword that you want to find. Well, typically, and I say especially radio, because you can't watch what they're doing and you can't look at their lips, you just have to hear it. You don't necessarily know where they said those words. If you have caption data, if you have transcripts from that, you can actually get a time point where they said that, and then go to that audio recording directly at that point, and then you have your content to work with for an edit. So it makes it much quicker and easier to find stuff that's deep, buried deep. Another element for signage, actually, that the factories, shopping, malls and retail spaces. If you were in any kind of Main Street, New York City type of thing, and you go by a bunch of stores and they have displays inside that are all lit up with video, but you can't hear what somebody's saying if there's a talking voice on that. Well, because you probably can't have speakers outside on the sidewalk. Same within a shopping mall. Adding closed caption to that content makes it available for other people who, in fact, may not even be deaf or hard of hearing, but are just walking by and get an idea of what's going on. Factories, again, like that, like to do that a lot. A great example I love to give, especially this time of year, sports bars, right? Let's say it's a Saturday and you're watching the Pitt game, but there's a few other games going on in the room, or Sunday. Let's not talk about Sunday football here. And you won't be able to appreciate what these other games are talking about. You can see the score, but you don't see any kind of play-by-play or dialogue unless those captions are on. So one more useful thing for captions for a broader community. And by the way, I talk about branding. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a content creator or someone down the stream of that from inserting their own information to say something like caption sponsored by, or underwriters or advertiser names or stuff like that can be inserted. So just got to do that carefully, because that dialogue's flowing so fast. You don't want to step on people's dialogues. Interesting question here. This slide's really more of a question. This venue in Atlanta, I don't know if they have a law requiring captions on displays in Atlanta or not. 2,000 TVs though in this venue. And here's something to ponder. That screen is one massive screen, 63,000 square feet. With the, where's that? Where do you define if that is one video screen or multiple video screens? Like any kind of video wall, when you mux it up to a bunch of tiles, are those all separate screens, or are they, individually as a one big meta screen? So that's kind of an interesting question. How many screens do you need to put captions on? Clearly, they got to be visible and available to everyone in that venue to see them. That's probably what I would think, but that's just my opinion. Kind of the neat thing about, we talked about translations, right? Because once you get data from a captioner, whether it's a human or an ASR, you can feed it into an engine and spit it out in all kinds of different languages. And we have ourselves a technology like that. And of course, there's for live applications, and there's plenty of cloud-based systems that'll do that for offline content as well. But it's kind of like the United Nations, right? When you have people talking in the United Nations these days, every country has its ambassadors, representatives there. Whoever's speaking on that stage needs to list, these ambassadors and such need to listen in their own language. There's a whole panel of people in small private rooms, they're quiet rooms talking in real time as they're hearing words coming in from the podium microphone and spitting it into the correct language of the people that need to hear it. And of course, mind you, these humans are also, they also need to be able to understand whatever language is going to be spoken at that podium. That's an amazing and complex thing. If you can digitize that, you bring that capability down to a much more local grassroots level where people can start accessing almost the Google equivalent or the Star Trek universal translator, right? So that's kind of a unique opportunity coming up. I have to say, this next slide, I just throw this in here because I ran across it by accident and I thought it was hilarious. Last time I checked, an 1/8 inch jack ain't going to fit into an RCA hole, but if they push really hard, it might. So anyway, okay, back to work. We talked about sidecars real briefly. Sidecars and transcripts. I think I just said the word transcripts for now, but in offline video editing, they're also called sidecars, and these are just simple text files that contain the text or the transcripts of the captions, and they're time coded. Different brands from Adobe or DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut, they all have their own kind of formats. And our product writes to many of the different ones. This is one example. This is actually a format that we have that we simply put these time codes on it that can be removed just to act as a base for simple transcripts of for like minutes of a meeting, stuff like that. So you can just remove those time points and actually just have minutes. But here's a popular format, SRT. And as you can see, that's a great example of where the time code points are. And then the editing applications are all aware of these data, these in points and out points, and they insert in the timeline. I mean, literally, you just drag the text file into the timeline and boom, it pre-populates across the whole thing. And you can therefore go in there and click on it and edit that too inside your video editor, which is kind of neat. This is another format, VTT, WebVT. So again, kind of the same concept. SAMI or SMI is what this one is. Looks a little more robust, the data that's this format includes. This one, anybody able to read this real quick? Hexadecimal? Yeah, it's not my thing either. Sceneries format, SCC, also very common and harder to read with the naked eye. This next format, it's a fascinating format, and it's well, I don't know if anybody can read it, but I can't read that. It's that whole redacted thing. But okay, anyway, so I'm not sure what that one says. But so town meetings is an interesting thing too, because of course, from a national broadcast standpoint, you got a caption because you're over the air, or you're doing meetings in like in a meeting room or a live event, or maybe a church service or something. But town meetings too, because more and more of them, especially with COVID, they're all web streaming, almost all of them. So even though the FCC may not require, but their community wants it. And so we're seeing a lot more town, municipalities or PEG broadcasters, PEG broadcasters doing this. And again, they can benefit too from having these searchable transcripts and minutes. And here's a couple of examples of lawsuits, recent ones, where disability rights groups are demanding either American Sign Language interpreters or some kind of captions for council meetings. So, or individuals suing for this as well. So it's a thing. One of their challenges, like any broadcaster that's upgrading your hardware, again, we talked about, I won't go too long into this, but just the hardware that you may have some old legacy standard def stuff versus high def. We actually have a customer that recently required a down converter to go from 708 down to 608 because their infrastructure through their cable company at some point requires NTSC composite video, but they're captioning it as 708, into an SDI signal. So it's like, oh, well, so you got to kind of go forward and back these days. And let's see, here's an example of WAMU, though, these folks down in Washington, D.C. Great example. They just take all of their content 24/7. There are a lot of talk there, a lot of interviews in D.C. You know, that's where all the news comes out of, it seems sometimes. And they caption 24/7 directly to a little iframe on their website. And it's great because they see a persistent number of people looking at it every day and every week. They know it's working. And of course, there's a strong hard of hearing community there, not too far away with Gallaudet University. And I just think, just from a personal level, if you're doing audio only content, those who are deaf or hard of hearing, especially deaf, can't benefit from this. You can't have an audio interview that people can't listen to, that does no good to someone. But if you can caption it, then they might be able to appreciate it. So that's kind of neat. And then again, back to those transcripts. A couple of related technologies here. Believe it or not, I am winding down, and I look forward to questions. It looks like there's the queue is filling up for questions. Thank you. And by the way, for all of you that, if everyone's used Zoom these days, but just, you know, find that Q&A button and feel free to ask there. CART, Communications Access Real-Time Translation. This is separate from broadcast. This is really putting, it's almost like the closed circuit TV of sorts for captioning within a room. You all remember about 100 years ago, the last time we had the NAB meeting in Vegas. That's what this picture's from. That's the main stage where ENCO is captioning on a couple of large format displays on either side of the main podium. Captions from the sessions, and we just did that all week long and just let it go. So the top half you're seeing is actually scrolling captions in real time. The bottom half is just a static image of the, you know, branding. That's all. So the top half is really what's interesting, is just watching it go by. And we have video of that too. Second, audio programming is more of an analog NTSC standard. It's kind of on the wane, of course. Descriptive audio is fascinating. That's somebody verbally talking and describing what is happening on the screen at that time. I say it's fascinating. It's also frustrating. It's complicated because you're listening to people talk, but you're also hearing a strange voice from beyond saying, these two people are now in the room and they are sitting down. And it's like, that's cool how somebody can say all that and say it so quickly, because they have to say it between the dialogue, right, of the actual people on camera. So that's hard to do. And of course, we've all heard of subtitles. You know, DVDs and streaming over the top stuff nowadays, you can have 2, 3, 4, 5 languages I've seen. That's all different text that you can call up and watch in different languages, the captions. So yeah, that's pretty cool stuff. As I'm kind of running through here, and I feel like I'm rushed because sometimes I go down into the rabbit hole and take too long. So forgive me if anybody wants me to kind of go back to stuff, please do. But let me kind of talk about where things are headed. And this is both fascinating and exciting and also a little scary. Computers are really good at parsing out data and getting results from that, right? And once you digitize your content into captions, however, again, you do that, you've got text that a computer can access and look and evaluate. Now, we've talked about data mining and how it makes it easier to navigate through your legacy video recordings. You know, somebody in the newsroom under a deadline can quickly find certain points or certain words were said in a recording and pull it out and, you know, and edit from there. But the computer is also really good at doing something called sentiment analysis, and that is understanding the intent of the person speaking and kind of where they're going in their dialogue. It's also starting to get possible to understand what they're thinking, or sorry, what they're feeling, what a person on the phone, for example, is feeling. And call centers are starting to use this technology. And readability assessment too, how complicated is the sentence or paragraph? And it's, you know, this is really interesting here. There's a call center software provider called Cogito. They're an MIT spin out, and their software is designed to aid call center operators in understanding where the software thinks the person at the other end of the line is going with the dialogue. Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they angry? You know, are maybe the languages they're speaking is not their prime language, their first language. So maybe they're having a little trouble, you know, understanding the operator and having things maybe repeated or something. You know, it's coaching the operator. Clearly an operator can tell if somebody's angry on the phone, but you can't always tell these other subtle things. Plus, remember, this is all metadata and all these sessions are recorded. So it can also be used for training purposes later. But what does that mean when the computer can start understanding where you're going with your sentences, what you're meaning to say? can it start to see things where you're saying things that are incongruous, meaning lying, right? Or making something up? You know, and what does it mean when it can tell if you're angry or sad or hesitant? That could help, or that could be used against, you know, your intent. So it's an interesting world we're in, and so it'd be interesting to see where these things go. What in 2001? I can't do that, Dave. So where will this go? But yeah, so there we go. That's all the captioning that fits. That's a whole lot right there. It'll continue to evolve. The AIs are just getting a whole lot better. Humans will always be the best and will always be needed. There's just not enough of them. And so thank goodness the AI is getting better, because there's still a whole lot of content out there that needs to be captioned. Remember, the viewers have the most power, right? They want things captioned, from town meetings to sports venues, and radio content. More and more they're going to want and expect to see captions. You know, inside venues too. Churches, by the way, do quite a lot, and even though they may not be captioning a webcast, at least they have captions inside the church itself, because American Sign Language, I could have talked about this a little earlier, but ASL is certainly hard to learn. That's it, and even harder to learn how to do it. But if it's simple text, chances are more people can probably read that if they understand the language that's being captioned. So if you're building a venue or retrofitting a venue, check the local government authorities, maybe to the county or even state level, and see what their laws are. You might have to install some additional equipment and be creative about what you're doing there. And also, mind you, if you're a content creator or somewhere along the distribution chain of content, your content may need to be caption aware. It may be going into places that you don't know the rules about. You may not know where it's going. It's safer to have it captioned, because if it's not, that may not be good for somebody else down the line associated with that content. So captioning is good. Yeah, so that's it, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. I'm done. So anybody there? Are we there?
Bill, can you hear me?
John, I hear you.
You mentioned that HDMI does not pass closed captioning, but I have an Apple TV that passes closed captioning via HDMI to my TV. Right?
So when you turn the captions on, you're using the Apple remote.
Oh. Okay. So
Indeed.
the Apple TV is doing the captioning?
Exactly. Yeah. And then that's just overlaying it on the video. It's effectively turning closed captions into open captions and running that through HDMI to your TV. So it's kind of,
okay.
Yeah.
And that's being done in an automated way, not a human. Obviously.
The captions in the content you watch are entirely based on the content creator's choice of resource. So, okay. You raise a really good, interesting question though, because when there's a lot of videos on YouTube that don't have captions associated with them, but Google, for one, I keep talking about them, but of course there's Microsoft and many of other folks out there, but those captions can be generated real time dynamically with YouTube's engine. The accuracy, I would say, is not that great, but it's certainly a way that you can watch or see some captions for content and spoken word that may otherwise not have them. Typically, it's best to use the captions that were created with the content originally.
Great, thanks, Bill.
Yeah. And I see, Kim, you've got a question. Are you seeing an increase in the use of captioning technology by content creators who are unregulated by the FCC? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's a lot of the township meeting kind of folks, all kinds of over-the-top streaming content creators. Again, I kind of reference that Netflix and Amazon scenario where they're not regulated by the FCC at all, but they still were getting sued because they didn't have captions for their content. So we have a customer that, actually, I'm not sure they're actually a customer, but a company I'm aware of in the New England area that they are a school system, a K through 12 learning system that took all of their videos offline from the web because they were so worried, the school board was so worried about being sued for not having them captioned. I don't know if they received indirect information that could happen or if they're just being very cautious, but they took it all off to caption it and then put it back online once it was captioned. So, which is unfortunate, definitely not good. But Mr. Giannatis, what's up?
Bill, I had a question.
Yes,
so as the Zoom meetings become more prevalent and it becomes part of our life, how best would you recommend something like the event that we're having tonight be closed captioned or open captioned so that multiple participants could read what the dialogue that's going on.
Yeah, very good point. And then actually Zoom does have, depending on your pricing tier, they've been slowly rolling out captions. Back in summer of 2020, we came out with a middleware application to add Zoom captions to our own product because at the time they weren't captioning, but now Zoom has been slowly rolling out captioning. We don't think it's their own engine. We think it's a third-party engine that's doing it. And also Google Meet, if anybody uses those tools by Google, they do that collaborative video session or video conferencing application. They also have a captioning button. I think anybody with an account there can use it. At least that's what I've experienced. So you turn it on and you start seeing these captions. You can't, at least for now, download a log or a transcript from Google. I don't know if Zoom allows that or not. And also, I'm not aware that you can add any kind of custom names or special words, and also something that we have called a filter that can fix errors. There's a town called Killeen, Texas. Whenever their captioning comes out, it looks like Killing, or about half the time it looks like Killing, Texas. Well, you can convert that and fix that so that the system never does say Killing, Texas. It always says Killeen, Texas. So that's another thing that these big automated engines in the cloud may not be able to do, that you got to look for if you really want to dial in your accuracy. So
Good, thanks.
yeah, man, thank you.
Hey, Bill, this is Greg.
Yeah.
Hey, in terms of sourcing the closed captioning data, do things like movies, for instance, do they use the movie lines, to develop closed captioning from the script?
Oh, right,
movie
right.
Script, and then that would be more like non-real time, I would imagine. Plus, you'd have to add linear time to that script. But also in news, don't they use like the prompter data, things like that, the news scripts for that as well?
Yeah, I can address both of those. Kind of being into captioning, I've become a little bit OCD about when I hear a word that is spoken on air on a movie or a TV show that's pre-recorded and then isn't in the caption stream. Those are done in post. Certainly they should have all the dialogue that's said in a script. I think they still have humans that have to stage that and phase that in so it lines up, of course, with the spoken word. But once in a while you get little anecdotal words that weren't in the script that an actor still may say, and that's what I catch that doesn't come through in the captions. So I'm not sure how much original captioning they're doing beyond simply just taking the script and parsing out the words in short little chunks that line up with the dialogue. Now that's for like a pre-recorded television or movie. So related to newsroom automation, we've had a capability for years, many years now, that we can integrate into MOS and ENPS and various other newsroom automation systems and pull in, and we do this for hundreds of customers now. We go in and actually pull the teleprompter script. We don't caption from that. That is an older technology that's out there. Not recommended because you never know when these the anchors, or let alone a weather forecaster or live interviewee, will not have a script or go off script. So what we do is we use it to simply parse out or pull in words that aren't within the lexicon or the vocabulary of our system right now. Our system, which is called InCaption, by the way, I just realized that's not even on any of these slides. But what InCaption does is it goes out and I've seen typically for a half-hour newscast, it may hold like about 10 words. By then, typically that broadcaster is already built into permanent libraries, the name of all the hosts, the name of unique words. Here around Pittsburgh, we've got, Allegheny, Monongahela, down in West Virginia, Mongalia, words that are not part of the English language. So you would want to add those localized words. But still, if it sees other words it doesn't know, it holds those in the memory because it's got over 1 million English words in it. So chances are it knows almost every word that's going to be in that rundown. But if there's a word or two or five or whatever it doesn't know, it'll hold that for typically an hour. Really only need it for half an hour, but why not an hour? And then when it finds ambiguous words within the live dialogue as they're talking, it'll hear something that sounds like a word, but it doesn't quite fit. Then it will look to that other list to try to get a much better reference as to what that word might be. So again, not to confuse prompter, direct caption text captioning from a prompter with an AI, because that prior example, you never know when the folks on camera are going to go off script. So kind of dangerous.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah, John.
John Schilberg is near Dallas, Texas, and he wanted to know if you can enable his mic so he can ask a question.
Oh,
He's on chat.
yeah. Okay. I don't see him on. Oh, he's on chat. Okay. I see a lot of stuff in chat here versus Q&A.
Yeah, right.
I'm looking at the Q&A right now, and Spike, you have a question. Stand by. Are there any questions in the chat here that my colleagues should direct me to? By the way, okay,
I didn't see any.
It looks like we've been talking among ourselves on chat while you've been explaining things.
Oh, great! I am that boring. Okay, great.
No, you're calling questions.
I'm kidding.
We're guessing at the answers.
Totally kidding. No, it's funny. And John Hahn, you said? John Hahn in Texas?
No, John Schilberg.
So let me keep scrolling. Oh, here we go.
Dallas.
I see it, John. So John Schilberg, you'd like me to open up your microphone? I guess. So now you have the ability to turn it on. I can't turn it on myself, but it looks like you just turned it on.
Testing 1 2 1 2.
Hello, Dallas, Texas. Howdy.
Hello. Hey, thank you for allowing us to come in from distant areas. I guess I don't qualify for the distant coffee mug because someone's coming in from Europe.
If Kim is live, and last time we checked, she's in Amsterdam. So
well, there you go. She wins the coffee mug. So anyway,
We're national and international.
there you go. I was going to attest to the fact that the hard of hearing community is a very well constructed and very well organized community. When I was director of engineering of the ABC O&O in Houston, I had the opportunity to visit with them, and they were passionate about their captioning and about their signing. And
really, signing as well.
It was critical. It was a critical meeting that I had with them, and they had with some difficulties with some other stations, and I think we were able to cure the problems that they were having with other stations, and provide them with great service. But it's a very committed group of people. So don't ever take lightly a call or an email about closed captioning from a viewer. Just don't. And so the other thing I had the question for you was how much of a computer system is loaded or is racked up on site at a local TV station, or is in the cloud to be able to afford this fast of processing? Is this some fire-breathing monster with an air conditioner hanging on the front door of it, or?
Well, we do require that you buy a Freon chiller that sits next to it.
There you go.
Yeah, so
it had to be.
now just a modern, literally, that's a great question. It's typical. It's like this technology is always getting faster and better. The speech engine runs really well, and a kind of just a higher end i7. I think the higher end i7 or low end i9 is what we build nowadays. Lots of i7 systems out there. One rack unit, one RU.
Are you doing anything GPU or with special audio cards?
No, we're not. Nope. No, it's all just running in software. There's no hardware acceleration. You know, it's pretty standard. Windows 10 Enterprise LTSB is actually what we're running it on. We've tested it on Windows 11. Currently no issues. Shouldn't be a thing.
And it's a lot, seems to be a lot faster than the old, what was it called? Dragon?
Naturally Speaking, yes, by Dragon Systems or something. They may still be around. I remember using that stuff. I used to work at QVC a long time ago, and we were doing an initiative. I was doing R&D and do automated captioners right when the FCC was starting talking about regulating it. I mean, I'm talking now around 2000. And we were playing with Dragon, Naturally Speaking. And of course, then you had to teach these things, each voice. Right nowadays, there's none of that training, no training at all. You couldn't train it if you tried. It doesn't need it. So, yeah.
And I had an inaugural descriptive video CBS experience with our call list. I was VP of Technology for Griffin Communications in Oklahoma, and our Tulsa station. I got the report the next morning that we had a viewer call that said, "Hey, what's with the voices talking about what's on TV. And of course, the receptionist said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I really don't. She was completely unaware that they were rolling that out.
Descriptive. Yeah,
And
that's
she told the
interesting.
guy, she said, sir, you're just not. I said, did you get his number by chance? I want to call the guy and apologize to him because he had his SAP channel on and he was listening to descriptive video.
Yeah. That is interesting.
Just suddenly appeared for the first time that night.
You remind me, because actually not long ago I got a new remote and I remember fumbling with it. I wasn't quite paying attention, or I turned it on by accident, and of course I knew what it was, but I'm like, how did I do that? Because then you start navigating through the menus how to turn it back off again.
Right.
So and especially interesting when that's a different language.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty cool. Actually, there's a lot of that. That's fascinating.
Well, thank you for allowing me the mic time and for the being able to visit with you guys. It's great to be part of this presentation.
Well, it's totally great for us too, because like John Humphrey said, like so many SMPTE groups, our meetings have been local, and going live, it opens up a whole another opportunity for the whole world to tune in. And if they see a topic or a presenter that they want to learn more from, they just show up. So
well, the Houston section, quite honestly, 25 years, 30 years ago was hobbled by the fact that people got to be 7 o'clock at night and they were just finishing their newscasts and they were like, I don't want to go to a meeting. But if we had Zoom back then, we probably would have had more vibrant meetings.
Yeah, it's interesting because we keep talking. I'm stealing the win from all my fellow section managers here, but we're talking. No, this is great. But we're talking. How do we, when we do become live and in person again? Are we going to webcast these live at the same time? Keep them going in this kind of in a hybrid fashion. It'd be fun to see what happens.
I hope that does happen. But thank you again.
Yeah, cool. No, John, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Spike Jones, and anybody else, if you have any questions or comments, please. Spike, you asked how standalone systems, no cloud, so let's call that on-prem. How do you update their vocabularies? So our system does it with simple text files. Like I mentioned, we can tie into a rundown system through the newsroom automation system, and it's just, pull in all the rundowns live. But you can also do it file-based, any kind of ASCII text file. We have a directory structure and a mechanism to activate our system to look into a certain folder for updates manually or on a clock schedule. So for instance, if you have a PEG meeting, if you have a town hall meeting coming up for once a month, you have an agenda, and you have an agenda, the names of the guests, the presenters, the topics, maybe a little description of what's being talked about. We recommend to our customers that you convert all that, literally copy and paste it in a notepad is just fine. Save that file in the particular directory in our system, and it will scoop it up. And again, just like with newsroom rundowns, look for the words it doesn't know and keep those in the memory for the time that it's captioning to, kind of give it a cheat sheet to work from. So, so there, Spike, I hope that helps. And again, I also mentioned the filters, which was after your message, but ways that you can correct errors that the engine may make routinely on its own. You can permanently educate it to kind of, here's how to fix it. For instance, we had a presentation, somebody was talking about Generation Z, and it kept captioning words that were kind of close. It did GNC, which Pittsburghers know there's a company here, but not related at all. That this was a broadcast event, a broadcast conference. And then Genzyme, which is close to Gen Z, I guess. But we just created a filter that just, so any of these errors, like I just mentioned, just make sure they all come out as the word Gen Z for Generation Z. It takes care of it. Okay, so now I'm babbling until somebody stops me. Another thing was codec versus codec. So somebody was talking about audio codecs, and the system thought it heard the word codec. That makes sense, right? And so we simply corrected it, codec equals codec. Or was it codec equals codec? Whichever. And so that takes care of it. So there's a few ways to get to the technology and customize it. Oh, please unshare the screen. Okay, got it. Let's see, I should look at this chat more often here. Anything for me that I'm missing from my colleagues in this chat session, or anyone? Any questions that I haven't addressed? Any other questions? Silence. John's back in his New York City penthouse.
Yes, right. Yeah, here in the New York City penthouse. And I guess I need to There, get a little more light. I wanted to follow up with what was said a minute ago about virtual meetings allow top presenters, they don't have to travel. We're lucky you're here. And that's really great because this was an excellent presentation. The number of questions is a good indication of that. And you really did a great presentation. There were a lot of things that I never thought about as it relates to closed captions. In fact, my brother Dan was a court reporter. That's a stenographer.
Oh, wow.
Who did that steno machine, and he would have it transcribed by a PC application called StenoCat, which would convert it to the transcript that would then be delivered to the court and the reporters the next day. And so I remember that. And I asked him once, had he ever considered doing captioning for television? And he said, no. So like you say about human people, there aren't enough to go around. And as you said, he's worn out after a court session. And so the thought of doing that full time or for a lot more hours for television wasn't of interest to him.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. We have one new question from Spike, by the way. Oh, we're getting more. There's a queue on line 5. Spike was asking about how accuracy is determined. And I say our accuracy is we say approximately 95%, give or take. There's an word error rate that there's a couple ways. There's like an NER model that's used in Canada, and there we hit a 98 out of 100. Strangely, that's not percentage, but it's very high though. I don't know all the details of how they analyze this, but they look simply humans. The real effective way to do it is a human. And there are companies, accuracy checking companies. For example, here, let me back up a step. If a broadcaster gets a complaint that that a listener, or I'm sorry, viewer, well, whichever, says the captions are inaccurate or something like that, they can actually hire. There are companies out there that will watch the video or listen to the audio and look at the transcript and compare and find errors in that. And that's literally how they just manually, I don't think you want to use an AI to tell an AI if it's right or wrong. That'll be interesting. One day, I suppose that's probably is happening in some way. But so, and the other thing you got to look for, there's a couple different methodologies. Sometimes some error rate checking systems, look for a word that's missing and that's a demarc. Others, if the word's missing, it can't get it wrong, so it's not a demarc. What gives us higher levels of accuracy in Canada is that looks for missing words as well. So even if we miss a word, okay, you can't type it. That's not a typo. It's not a mistake that it's spelled wrong, but it's still missing. So that's a nick against us. So there's a couple of different ways to look for that. The more stricter is harder to meet, which is good. Hope that helps. Kind of meandering. Oh, wait, one more. Okay, Tim. Hi, Tim. Oh, okay, got it. Not a question. So never mind. But Tim, it's good to see you. Anybody else?
Did someone say there's a Ed Fracticelli on this meeting call?
Yes, he's in Cogito tonight.
Ah, okay.
He's here.
I was a member of the DS studio editor list, and it is a list that Ed, I believe it was this Ed, contributed to a lot and always enjoyed his posts. And it's great to maybe say hello and thank you from a distance anyway, in both time and space.
I don't know that Ed can verbally respond, John, but he's listening.
He can
Okay,
chat. John, Ed just chatted about he likes my candle. So thank you, Ed. So he can also talk to you in the chat though, John.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you, Ed. I appreciate it.
Oh, and Spike has a follow-up. Keeping my heels to the fire. He's asking about latency. How's it involved with ASR? So again, the latency comes up with there's two elements impacting latency with an ASR, right? Because one of them is very much like a human, really. Both of these systems are doing raw speech to text. Our brains do it automatically. We hear a word, we think we hear the word to. Pretty much in the parlance of its usage, we understand, okay, it means TO or TWO or, something like that. But the ASR has to then do this other step that a human also is really good at automatically doing, and that is trying to determine the correct spelling. So like I mentioned earlier, this the statistical analysis that the system does to try to find, because it knows the English language and other languages and the grammar structure of each of these languages that we can caption in. And it understands typically what words belong in a sentence, nouns, verbs, pronouns, all that stuff. I got a D in English, I think, so I'm not sure I'm good at exactly understanding grammar very well. But so that's basically how two elements, raw speech to text and then a statistical analysis. If you do, might kind of confuse a little bit because it's waiting for the next word, but then we also have a threshold to get that word out there and get on to the next word. So there's a point where it's got to, as that phrase is fish or cut bait, right? You got to keep that pipeline of captions going. Other question in the chat here. Stand by, let me scroll there.
That's Otto from WPXI.
And let me move a window over here. Let me move another window over here. Oh, by the way, John, I don't know if you see this, but Ed says we still own and use 2 DS systems at their facility. He'll run them.
Yeah, I've been enjoying his text.
Oh, good.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah. And Otto, yeah. Hello, Otto. You're asking if there's a better opportunity or if there is an opportunity to better integrate real-time newsroom computer scripts or even prompter output to help coach the ASR. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's where we tie into a rundown system and automatically pull in the text from that, skim it for any words the ASR engine doesn't know, hold those uniquely spelled words that are not part of its million-word dictionary into memory during the duration of the newscast, so it can pull from that list if it finds some word that it's hearing but not quite feeling comfortable is part of its current vocabulary. I wish I could do that. So in I have mentioned before, I typically see about 10 words, 8 to 10 words. I don't know. It's hard to be exact in a typical half-hour newscast that it doesn't know. And those are typically names of, there may be some jargon or an acronym or a term of a person that is not already in the system, because of course, if you are doing newscasts, you would already have pre-populated the system permanently with the names of all your talent and advertisers and underwriters and all kinds of other non-English words that may come up in a typical newscast. You can certainly create those permanent lists that it will always look at, but then these unique things that come up once in a while in a rundown, that's what this integration through a Moss listener is also useful for. Somebody's talking about John Travolta here. Okay, wait. Oh, boy. Okay, wait, John, you're clarifying that is a non-real-time system, though. I'm not sure what, if you'd like, Otto, we could open your mic and we can discuss. Oh, and he did know the Ann Arbor reference. Yeah, I don't know what they do in Columbus. But John, just message if you'd like us to open mic, or Otto, excuse me, let's open up your mic. We can do that for you. Okay, great. It says sure. All right, cool. All right, stand by. Don't say anything nasty about Michigan. John, feel free to open it up.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me now?
Sorry, Otto. Yes.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bill. And
Hey,
thanks for SMPTE Pittsburgh for putting on this presentation. You guys are awesome. Always enjoy it and really wish we can get together in person again soon. What I'm referring to, Bill, is we are able to, in hindsight, go back and improve on our captioning using our computer system. But would it be possible to have artificial intelligence to the sense that it could be reading the actual script as we're going, and it could use that to help coach it? And the other side of it is that, we do have a prompter that is basically doing exactly that. The prompter is taking the newsroom computer system output and putting it onto the prompter for the talent, couldn't we somehow use that to improve the accuracy? And 95% accuracy is great, but realize that that's 5% is 1 out of 20 words. So is there a way to get up into even higher percentages if we were to be able to integrate either the newsroom script system or the teleprompter? Thank you.
Yeah, no, great, thorough question. So the idea of actually parallel synchronizing the newsroom automation with the online AI, we don't do that. And I've not heard of that done. Doesn't mean it's not, but I've not heard of it myself, but that's interesting because again, we similarly are doing the same thing by at least pulling in those uniquely spelled non-English words from that rundown. But what you're talking about is even trying to synchronize that. So if that unique word is at 23 minutes in, and they hear it, coming right out of the prompter, and they meaning the AI hears it, and that would be an interesting way to even tighten up accuracy, I would think. Just in case it hears a couple of ambiguous words that may be similarly sounding, it may not know where they are in that half-hour program. Whereas your example of synchronizing the two might actually help narrow that down. I'm going to make a note. Pardon me.
Well, and that would be under the
that's
category of feature requests. I know everybody's always working to improve their products.
Absolutely.
That would be something that would be, I believe, the next step of improving your accuracy.
Yeah, we will have to call it the auto engine.
Thank you. Love it.
Indeed. And because my short-term memory at this hour of the day is gone, what was the second? You had kind of a secondary question or follow-on?
No, it was pretty much that, using one of two different techniques, either the newsroom computer system tied directly in, or you could take a serial output from the prompter. Of course,
Yes.
the main issue with that is that you'd have to be able to, the reason why you might want to do the newsroom system is because you can read ahead and it doesn't delay your captions. If you get it from the prompter, the ability to read ahead is not there. However, we, as well as probably a lot of other broadcasters, do use profanity delay. So we take advantage of that 5-second profanity delay and feed the audio directly into the captioner, and voila, it comes out almost ahead of time sometimes.
So that's interesting. We have a way of delaying the video coming through our system. We call it lip sync. Well, of course, and that's exactly what it is. We don't do it a lot, and it's very simple, cascading a couple of video cards and using the hard drive as a DDR delay, just very simple. But the question there is, when people have the need to look at a caption, if they're not always looking at the captions, especially, do they want, and I don't know the answer to this. It's I personally, in my own opinion, I like it in captions are like a couple seconds delay, because then if I didn't quite hear the word, maybe a second, I can look down and see what that word was. If they are in real time, I might miss the word and it'd be gone. And of course, to your point, if it's ahead of time, then it might be gone too. So you have to kind of think how different people are engaging with the captions in the video content to see about that delay. Yeah, we know the humans, you have a delay, of course. And of course, if they're off site, there's a certain amount of technical delay as well through that whole workflow. But I'm not sure how fast we can get past that 3 to 4 seconds without losing some of that accuracy that the statistical analysis gives. So, but I like your live assist concept. I really do. So thanks.
Great to see you, my friend.
too.
Let me return the favor of buying you lunch one of these days. Come on over.
Looking forward to that. You got a deal. Speaking of buying lunches, I think I owe Mike a lunch, by the way, Mike G. So let's see. I'm scrolling through the chat here. I apologize. I may be missing things because there's a lot of things. Let's see. Interesting. Somebody talks about AIs and taking jobs away. Yeah. Again, luckily in this case, there's just not enough humans to caption what's out there. So anybody who can work as stenographer can get a job now. That's for sure. Sorry for the pausing here. Okay, yeah. I think, and anybody else? Let's see, is nobody there? Silence? My colleagues, are they all gone? I see all these static smiley faces. Oh, John's mic is open.
Good presentation.
There, I have a live
Thanks, Mike.
face.
There you go.
I think that the presentation was great, and the number of comments and questions is a good example of how much we learned about closed captioning. On the surface, it seems pretty straightforward and simple, but really I was surprised when you drill down into it. There's a lot going on there. And I think we're much better informed now about closed captioning and things like that.
Thanks, John.
I would like to bring this meeting to a conclusion, if that's okay, Bill.
Oh yeah, I'm done pontificating. Please
You did
spare
a great
everyone else.
job. Yeah, well, you know, you did your presentation in right on an hour, and then we've had 50 minutes of questions. We've never had so many questions, so that's a good indication of people were listening and learning a lot.
Let's take a last look at the. Okay,
Yeah.
Yep. Questions are all we're up to date on those. Yep. So yeah, I'm done.
Okay,
Right.
great. Thank you so much, Bill. It was an excellent presentation. And also thank you for managing the Zoom at the same time. I appreciate that as well. I promise I'm going to learn how to do that.
We'll have a training session and a
That's
6-hour
right.
lunch. We'll do it over lunch.
And everyone, thank you for joining us. We had a great turnout. I think we're back on a roll here in the fall. I'm really looking forward to Dan Turk's presentation on new trends in remote production. There are lots of implications to labor, freelancers, top talent, centralized equipment with this new approach to remote productions. And I know Dan's presentations will be great. Stay tuned for the date and time for that presentation. And thank you all very much for attending our meeting this month. And we'll see you next month.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Be well.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
Okay. Same
Thank
here,
you.
John.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.